Hello. Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the first of three workshop sessions that are part of our 2022 Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Summit. Our summit actually began last Thursday with two plenary sessions. The first review featured an overview of the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center's in-depth analysis of Governor Wolf's proposed 2022-2023 state budget. And that was followed by an inspiring keynote speech from Senator Vincent Hughes talking about the theme of this year's summit, which is advancing democracy for Pennsylvania's future. If you missed last week's session or just want to view them again, they are available for streaming online, and we will drop the links to those videos in the chat. Welcome to this session today, We the People Pennsylvania's top issues for 2022. We know that 2022 is a year that offers plenty of opportunity for progress in several key issues that are important to constituents across the Commonwealth. And so we appreciate you joining us today for this discussion of what some of those issues are. First, let me tell you about We the People. We the People Pennsylvania is a campaign of, by, and for all the people of Pennsylvania. Our goal is to ensure that everyone can thrive, no matter whether they are Black, brown, or white, native born or immigrant, Asian or Latinx, poor or rich, whether they live in cities, suburbs, or rural areas. We call for decisive leadership and bold action from state lawmakers to keep our families safe today and to build a stronger, healthier, and more just future, realizing that for too long, we have let politicians who serve the interests of corporations and the rich divide us on the basis of what we look like, where we come from, and where we worship or how much money we have. And by dividing us, they've given us public policies that do far too little to help most Pennsylvanians while making the rich and corporations wealthier. Let me go through the agenda real quick, and then we will talk a bit about, and then we will introduce our panelists. Just a reminder, if you have questions for the panelists, you can put them in a chat, and then we will pose the questions to the panelists at the when the time permits. 2021 was a busy year for the We the People Pennsylvania campaign. We spent most of the last year urging the General Assembly to spend billions of dollars of unspent American Rescue Plan monies. Now, I say billions of dollars. That is billions with a B, Bezos billions. And we wanted them to do their part to ensure that we had a recovery that includes all Pennsylvanians. In early February, we saw strides towards that when Governor Wolf proposed the Brighter Pennsylvania Plan. That plan is aimed at doing just that. It proposes to spend $1.7 billion, again with a B, dollars on a diverse variety of programs that could promote immediate and future success. And that includes some issues we'll be talking about here today. $500 million for the PA Opportunity Program. That would provide much needed relief for workers and families from the high cost of childcare and household expenses, and give them opportunities to complete a degree or a license that will strengthen their skills. We saw a proposal for $225 million for small business support, which would go to the COVID Relief Statewide Small Business Assistance Program. And that program provides grants ranging from about $5,000 to $50,000 to small businesses that have been economically impacted by the pandemic. It's worth noting the program would prioritize women and minority-owned businesses in rural communities. We will see $204 million for property relief for low-income renters and homeowners. That would be through the existing property tax rent rebate program, which would give a one-time bonus rebate to current program users, doubling existing rebates and helping an estimated 500,000 Pennsylvanians. We would see $325 million for PA's healthcare system, and that would go towards long-term care and recruitment and retention, expanding county mental health programs, and expanding student loan forgiveness programs at FIA to include additional healthcare workers. Now, ARP funding isn't the only issue we've been focused on or are planning on focusing on this year. Education funding has been a top issue. We've seen an historic education funding lawsuit just wrap up, realizing that every child in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is underfunded according to the state's definition of adequate education. We also know that children in predominantly Black or brown or Hispanic-speaking schools are far more underfunded than everyone, but again, every child in the Commonwealth is underfunded. We're also watching very closely what is amounted to assaults on our very democracy by adherents of the big lie. They're going after the institution itself, looking to weaken our system of checks and balances and attempting to legislate through constitutional amendments, all while gatekeeping which amendments to the Constitution they'll even consider. I would like to move on and address our panel speakers next. For panelists, I'll ask you to introduce yourselves, give an overview of your topic, answering the question, what is your issue and why is it important? First, we will start with Jenna Henry with Better Pennsylvania to talk on support for working families.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jenna Henry. I'm the Deputy Director of Better PA. Like Nick said, I'm here today to talk about the importance of support for working families. I'm sorry, what was the question you said we needed to answer?
Why is this issue important?
I mean, that's kind of hard to put in a sound bite. Especially like as a formerly incarcerated person and a survivor of poverty and the trauma that comes along with it, I can tell you that if we ever want to truly change the way our system works or the way our society works, we have to address poverty, because poverty is what is causing all of our problems. It is poverty and the trauma that comes along with it that causes drug use, violence, you name it. It's the root cause of it all is poverty.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jenna Henry with Better Pennsylvania. Next, I'd like to kick it over and introduce Kadita Kenner, Executive Director of the New Pennsylvania Project. Kadita, hi.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for having us on the panel this afternoon. Grateful to be here. Yeah, so my name is Kadita Kenner, Executive Director of the New Pennsylvania Project. We're a voting rights organization with a primary focus on voter registration. And I'm here today to talk about the need to defend democracy. And, when we say defend democracy, that's not really tangible. It's really not something someone can touch on and really feel, but we know what democracy is and the way that we do feel. And I think about the fact that in a democracy, we get to elect our elected officials and they don't get to select us as their constituents. And so in this very moment, our democracy is in peril. It's not hyperbole. There are concerted efforts to erode democracy, not only here in the Commonwealth, but across the country. There are more than 150 bills across the country in this moment that would put additional barriers in front of folks wanting to cast their ballots. And that includes Pennsylvania. There are more than 75 potential changes to our Constitution that legislators here in the Commonwealth would like to make in this moment. The majority of those focused in on the judiciary and our election system, changing the way in which Pennsylvanians get to cast their ballots, changing the way in which we elect our judiciary. This is a disruption of our co-equal branches of government. It's a power grab by the legislature here in Harrisburg and across the country, other legislatures across the country, to grab power in this moment. And so I'm looking forward to being able to talk about this as we move along in this panel. But it's very important for folks out there to know that the number has jumped to now 1.7 million Pennsylvanians who are eligible to vote, but currently not registered in this moment. This is an institutional failure on the part of so many, that we have so many Pennsylvanians who feel as though they are not taking part in this democracy. So let alone defending democracy, we just need folks to take part in this democracy. Pennsylvania, we're the 5th largest state, but we're the 5th worst in spending when it comes to our elections and carrying out this sacred right that we all have to vote. So looking forward to the conversation today, Nick.
Thanks a ton, Kadita. Really appreciate you being able to join us today. Stephon, are you there? I'd like to kick it over to Stephon Hawkins next. He's the owner of Good Brothers Cafe Bookstore in Harrisburg. Hi, Stephon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. You're muted. Yep.
Okay, all right, there we go. Hey, how you doing? I was just say it wasn't letting me unmute myself. You had to let me do it. But I appreciate you being here. I'm currently actually at the bookstore right now, so that's why my camera was off. It got a little busy right now. Slow all day, then got busy all of a sudden when it's time to jump on the Zoom. But I'm here on behalf of minority-owned, Black-owned businesses and women businesses across the state of Pennsylvania. The Brighter PA plan will provide $25 million to small business that has been economically impacted by the pandemic, prioritizing women and minority-owned businesses in rural communities. Oh, that was my thing. Oh, and why? And basically, I'm gonna speak on how Pennsylvania needs to allocate these funds to women and minority-owned businesses a little bit more. Coming from a city like Harrisburg, where the Black and Brown community is 52% of the population, yet we own 3% of the businesses, and where 10% of that 3% of businesses actually fail within their first year because of not being able to be funded properly or being able to find any type of government assistance. There's a lot of barriers in place when trying to get funding, any type of grants from state, local, or federal levels for Black-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses across the board. And that actually amplified a lot more during the pandemic, when a lot of times they were denying your grants, denying your loans for the smallest things, yet they were giving our counterparts millions of dollars as we were suffering. And I've seen a lot of Black-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses close within that first, 6 to 7 months of the pandemic striking everybody. So it was more abundance within the urban community as well. So I'm here to speak mostly on, the state of Pennsylvania doing the right thing with this money, actually giving it and providing grants or loans, however they want to give it to the community, but actually making sure that minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses are receiving these funds and proportionally dispersing them, not just giving a chunk to a certain group and then allowing the rest of us to fight over the crumbs as they have done in the past. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to be here, and I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Stephon. Thanks for joining us. Next, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Jackie Huff, the State College Area School Board, but she's here with Put Families First. Jackie.
Pennsylvania's for fair funding as well. Yep. Oh, so hi, I'm Jackie Huff. I'm here to talk about education funding in the state of Pennsylvania, which is just not in a good place right now. It's not adequate, and it's also not equitable in the way it's being distributed, and we have a lot of work to do. And the good news is that we have the money and we need to spend it. So there's no reason to let it sit around. And so Governor Wolf has proposed drastic increases to education funding this year so that no one will see a decrease, and also we'll get more money to the places that need money. So I'm really looking forward to talking about that today, and I get really excited talking about it. So Nick, tell me if I'm rambling and going too fast. But thank you so much for having me here.
No worries, Jackie. I do not think it'll be an issue today. Thank you for joining us. Pennsylvania's for fair funding. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Dwayne Heisler with Seiu Healthcare. Hi, Dwayne.
Hi, Nick, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm with Seiu, the Service Employees International Union, and we're made up of 4 locals. I'm with the healthcare local, and I have to say that each and every year, year after year, we hear from Harrisburg that Pennsylvania workers, that they can't possibly have the investments that they need in their futures and their families because we have this crushing debt, right? But now, because of the American Rescue Plan and Joe Biden, and also the recovery that Pennsylvania is making, we have an $11 billion surplus. I truly believe that the budget is a moral document. And so when it comes to the unions that I'm representing today, thinking about healthcare unions, the people who are on the front lines helping us through the pandemic, and looking at the investment that we heard earlier in the nursing home industry and Medicaid rate increases to address the staffing crisis is incredibly important, but also looking at our other locals when we come to the child care provider rates, the creation of the child welfare crisis response team and things like that. And also, as you just heard a moment ago, investments in K through 12 and also raising the minimum wage, which was also a big part in there. I think that what we're looking at is that the proposals that Wolf is making is an investment in the most vulnerable people in our community. And I think right now we can't afford to not listen to them and to make sure that that money is placed there. So that's kind of what I'm here for. So thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us, Dwayne. I did want to note that we were expecting to be joined by Brittany Smalls, Eastern Regional Director for One Pennsylvania, but they are not able to make it today. So they will be missed. They were going to speak on housing. We will have to address that at another point in time. But what that means, panelists and speakers, is that we've got a little bit more time for y'all to pontificate and talk about what is most important about this. And there's a lot. This is I've listed. We talked about 5 different issues here with more on the horizon, and so feel free to take time. I don't know that we're gonna be worried about time so much. The way this is going to work is I'm going to go through in reverse order. So Dwayne, you'll be first, asking a question that I sent you ahead of time. It's okay, Dwayne. The question I crafted for you is something that you will be amazing at. It's all good. And then afterwards, I have a question that I will go through and ask each of you to address, and then we will open it up to audience questions. Does that sound good? Excellent. So Dwayne, coming back to you, the pandemic has exposed deep inequities throughout our Commonwealth, many of which we knew were already there. Problems within our healthcare system were especially highlighted over the past 2 years. Now, I've mentioned the Brighter PA plan, and you mentioned in it how it seeks to address some of this, to tune that. Some of it will be used on retention and recruitment, just as a reminder, on expanding county-based mental health programs, expanding student loan forgiveness. You mentioned expanding health Medicaid. Can you talk about the effect that the levels of support in Brighter Pennsylvania and some of the other proposals we've seen floated around, what would that have on our healthcare system? And are there any further improvements you would suggest?
Yeah, so I guess it's not really surprising to everyone that we don't have the investments as we need in this state, and it's all over the place. And healthcare is, of course, a good example of that. But as we have heard throughout the pandemic, that there's been some real structural challenges within healthcare. And this is all across the board, from our hospitals to our nursing homes, where we saw the incredible death rates that were happening there, not only with residents, but also with staff, with our home care, and also our state institutions, our state hospitals and so forth, and mental health facilities. And so it's almost, to me, it just seems like if it can't happen in this moment, I don't know when it could or when it would. And the voices of healthcare workers have always had, I guess, gosh, when you go to the doctor's office, you always listen to what the nurse says, right? And healthcare voices need to be listened to. And sadly, they're not, and they have not been in this budget fight. And what tends to happen is the voices of the owners of these facilities get heard, but not actually the frontline workers who are taking care of everyone. And I think that that's the most important part, because when items get funded and we leave it up to the institutions to actually deliver them however they want, it often doesn't end up at bedside. And I don't have to tell anyone out there right now how important that is, because we all have family, we all have friends, and ourselves. At one point or another, we're all going to need some kind of care. And what kind of care do you want? Right now, there is an incredible crisis that's become worse because of the pandemic. But it's not that we have a shortage, for example, of nurses. There are plenty of nurses out there, but it's a matter of making sure that the funding is directed towards what we need to do. It's the working conditions that are there. Like, it doesn't make sense in some of our, in fact, well, in many of our rural areas where we're providing these services, that people could be working elsewhere and not dealing with the hard work that it takes to actually work in a nursing home or work in home health care. Home health care is even more, there's even more pressure there. Can you imagine working at a job, and maybe some of you do right now, where you have absolutely no benefits? There's no vacation time. There's, you're working at a poverty wage, which is why the minimum wage is really important, because many of those positions are less than that. And you don't have the training that you need. It's unsafe. I mean, some of these folks are learning how to do their job from YouTube videos. I mean, it's that desperate. There is a real structural problem here, and it comes back to the funding and the way that funding is being used. And we see this also like in the long-term care, the nursing home situation that we have, the nursing home industry. Many of those nursing homes are for-profit organizations, and sometimes, well, a lot of times when those funds are dispersed, they don't actually end up at the bedside. And what we're talking about is having the proper amount of staffing. Now, Pennsylvania has made a jump, and they're increasing their hours for staffing. The problem is that needs to be funded, but it needs to be funded directly there. We don't believe that money should be used to build a corporate headquarters in another state, right? It needs to actually go to the bedside here in Pennsylvania to take care of us. Did we learn nothing? Like, are we just going to go on and just continue to fund our healthcare system the way we did before the pandemic? You know, I hear there's another wave coming. What do you guys think? You know, where should we put this money? So I know I've been all over the board with these things. I don't know how much time I have here, but the funding for hospitals, for nursing homes, for home health care, for our state workers is incredibly important. If we want to keep people in the jobs where they are, and also make sure that we have the proper staffing so that we can make sure that we're being taken care of, we're not waiting in waiting rooms, and if we have some other kind of emergency, that we have the healthcare workers that we want, then we need to properly fund it. The conversation always seems to be in our community, like, who owns it, who manages it, who funds it, who's, you know, and never about the kind of healthcare does this community actually need. Well, when we budget for it, then that is the conversation that we need to have, and that's where those funds need to come. So,
well said, Dwayne. And yeah, I mean, as you have noted, there are clearly a number of issues that are contained within that one. And we, the people of Pennsylvania, stands committed to standing with SEIU Healthcare to address some of those as much as we can this year and moving forward. From healthcare to education, Jackie, the question we have for you today is, data has shown that when considering the costs required to provide what the Commonwealth defines as an adequate education, as I mentioned, every child in Pennsylvania is underfunded to some degree. And while it is true that schools with higher percentages of Black, Brown, or Spanish-speaking students are underfunded the most, again, every single child is underfunded to some degree. We've just seen the conclusion of a historic education lawsuit filed in Pennsylvania courts. And while we aren't expecting a ruling a little while longer, can you talk a bit about some of the takeaways from the lawsuit? And if you're willing to be a soothsayer or offer an educated guess, are you willing to give any prognostication as to what we may see happen, or rather, can you tell us what you would like to see happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm guessing that whatever happens, it's going to get appealed to the Supreme Court. That's really my best guess at this point. So we're going to have to wait a while longer. But the good news is, like, we don't really have to wait, because the outcome of this trial will not actually direct any funds anywhere. It will simply be a declaration that either the funding system in the state of Pennsylvania for education is constitutionally sound or it is not. And so if it is found to not be providing a thorough and efficient education as the Constitution demands, then the legislature will have to deal with it, right? And like, that could take another decade, right? So in some ways, like, this lawsuit, people look at it and think, oh, well, what's it really doing? But what it really has done is laid bare exactly the problems that exist within this state, from, terrible facilities to, schools that can't afford, like Scranton can't afford to have foreign language education in their middle school, right? Like schools in Panther Valley cannot afford to have enough reading specialists to meet the demands that their students need. There is just so many deficits across the state. And so I happen to live in a school district and sit on the board in a place where the taxpayers make up the difference. So our state funding here in State College is very low, but 82% of our budget, 82% of it comes from local taxpayers here, right? That's just not fair. And it's especially not fair to districts that it can't raise that sort of revenue. Like Lancaster City could raise its property taxes continuously, and it still wouldn't bring in the revenue it needs to fund its schools. So the lawsuit did a really good job of laying this all out and also pointing out all the economic benefits that we could reap if we did fund education properly and we did give these students all a thorough and efficient education. It's also laid bare just how little our state legislative leaders even care about education. Right, so the quote everyone keeps coming back to is that Jake Corman's lawyer said that it's okay if we don't prepare everyone for college because the needs of the Commonwealth dictate that we do need people who can flip pizza crusts. And I have no problem with people working to flip pizza crusts, especially if we raise the minimum wage and make that like a dignified work. But the problem that they're not realizing is that where you live in Pennsylvania dictates whether or not you have an opportunity to do something other than minimum wage work. And that's not fair. Every kid deserves that opportunity, and every kid deserves a job that recognizes their humanity and allows them to participate in society with dignity. And school is where this starts. And if we cannot fix this in schools, then it's just going to show up in every other aspect of our Commonwealth. So I really hope that people are taking note, and we're really trying to sound the alarms and get this taken care of in this budget cycle, right? Because we have the opportunity here to increase funding. I would love to see it increase even more. Governor Wolf's number was not as high as I wanted it to be, but his increase in education, along with his reforms to charter funding and his proposals to change the EITC, which is like a tax credit for people who donate to private schools, could make a big, big difference in the Commonwealth. And so we hope we can push that all through.
Awesome, Jackie. Thank you for that breakdown. And later on, I'd like to hear a little bit more about some of these, the charter school reforms and whatnot. We'll give you an opportunity to talk about that in a little bit. Stephon, I saw you had to step away for a second, but we're going to come to you next to talk about small businesses. Jackie mentioned that we certainly need to raise the minimum wage, and we've heard that a couple of times. We also need to support small businesses as they do so. And so my question for you, Stephon, is the Brighter Pennsylvania plan would provide $225 million to small businesses, as we mentioned, prioritizing women and minority-owned businesses in rural communities. You and I have spoken before about how while this is great, and it's a great idea, the last time we saw this type of support, it wasn't exactly fairly distributed. Can you talk a little bit about how it was that it was not fairly distributed, why you think that happened, and how we could avoid that disparity with this round of support?
Yeah, we talked briefly about it like once or twice over conversations through telephone and emails. But this is Good Brothers is actually my second business. My first business was actually House of Vegans. I owned and operated the first Black-owned vegan restaurant in Central Pennsylvania out of Harrisburg City. It was open roughly about 7-8 months. And I took my major hit when Governor Wolf decided to have that second shutdown from about Thanksgiving of 2020 to about January 4th or something like that. I seen 65% decrease in my business. Now, mind you, I did open up in the middle of a pandemic, but I had signed my lease and everything before the pandemic had started. So a lot of people like, why would you open up a pandemic? Well, we didn't know the pandemic was coming when we signed the lease, and I had to make money because my landlord had to make money too on his property. So when it went time to actually own the business, and then the money was being allocated and the government was sending out the grants and all the money to the states and the county areas, me and my fiance at the time had missed the deadline by a week. Not the deadline, excuse me. We had missed the time requirements by a week. We signed our lease February 23rd. You had to be in business by February 15th. And there was no way around it. They kept telling us, oh, the president, was it Biden? Yeah, Biden was president. No, Trump was president. Whoever was president. But Trump was president. Yeah, Trump was president. Biden only been president for a little bit. But whoever passed down the laws and everything like that had told us that they put these strict stipulations on time restraints and time frames of when your business had to be open. But I was like, yo, the company was started in 2020. But there's like, when did you open the doors? When was the doors open? When were you making money? And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like, so you telling me I have to suffer like everybody else and anything, even though I'm a new business, I should, do da-da-da. And they was like, yes, you can't have no money. So I actually had to shut my restaurant down and pivot whatever money I had and put it into the coffee shop. Now, mind you, they was going at the same time and everything like that. I was doing a lot and overextending myself, but whatever. So the fair advantage is that a lot of African-American owned businesses didn't receive proper funding to keep themselves open. We wasn't allowed to petition for the shutter grants as a lot of people were. As we were seeing the people getting $100,000, $50,000, $20,000, even $1 million or so in PPP funding or any type of grants, a lot of African-American and minority-owned businesses were suffering. So my thing in coming on this Zoom today was to speak on. Can you hear me? I don't know if I can be heard. Or was to speak on. Okay, my bad. Was to speak on this issue about how we didn't receive proper funding, whether it was a minor mistake in paperwork, a time date missed by a week or missed by a couple of days, all affected a lot of businesses. Now, we can all say, hey, you should have opened up earlier. You should have got your paperwork in earlier. But that still doesn't negate the fact that a lot of Black-owned and minority-owned businesses suffered just the same as any other business, woman-owned business as well, and that we should have had a fair shake at receiving some of that money. And then we fast forward almost a year later, 2 years, still in the pandemic, as they like to say. But sorry, man. Oh, but 2 years, still in this pandemic that we still haven't seen any type of money pushed down, and the state of Pennsylvania is just holding on to it. What they're doing with it, we don't know. When they're going to pass it out, they keep pushing back the dates. They keep telling us it's going to come soon. I don't know if Wolf is waiting for his time in office to be out, and he's just going to let the next governor do it. But a lot of businesses are suffering now, and we still need that help.
Appreciate that, Stephon. A lot of the American Rescue Plan dollars have been held up in the legislature, and Wolf is trying to spend it. It's our legislature that's really stopping the expenditure.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Good, no worries. Appreciate you coming here. Next, we're gonna hop over to Kadita to talk a little bit about democracy defense. Kadita, here in the Commonwealth, as across much of the country, we've seen unprecedented attacks on our voting rights and institutions that make our democracy run. So, which include a historic number of proposed changes to our Constitution in what I will call an unconventional way of legislating by the General Assembly. You mentioned a number of issues when you did your opening statement, issues that Pennsylvania residents should be aware of as we work to defend our rights to vote. Can you kind of highlight what are the top one or two issues that the New Pennsylvania Project is working on this cycle, and issues that we, the people of Pennsylvania, will be looking at as well?
Just the top one or two, Nick, because there's so many, right? You
actually have a lot of time. So if you want to do 3 or 4, you can.
Okay, because there's a lot to talk about. As I mentioned in the opening, we are currently in a moment in time in which our democracy is truly in peril. And when we speak about our democracy being in peril, we must talk about the fact that we have a branch of government, our legislative branch of government in Harrisburg, trying to usurp its authority and power over another co-equal branch of government. And I think about what they're trying to do in this moment. And in order to do that, we must go back, for all the history buffs out here watching today, we must go back in time for a moment and talk about how we got here at this point and why we're here at this point. And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that this is a cycle that repeats itself over and over again. I think about the 1950s. I think about in the 1950s when we had a United States Supreme Court who was overturning Jim Crow, who was making sure that folks who look like me can walk through the front door of an establishment such as Stephon's, that I could break bread with my brothers and sisters of all races, right? And so while that was happening in the United States Supreme Court, while they were overturning Jim Crow and ensuring that we could attend schools with one another, right? That separate was not equal. We had folks who were very upset at the United States Supreme Court and wanted to impeach the United States Supreme Court justices based upon the decisions they were making to overturn Jim Crow. Well, let's take this now to the future. Let's take this to 2018, where in the Pennsylvania legislature, we had legislators who were upset about the decisions that were coming out of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and therefore wanting to impeach the Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices for the decisions that were coming out to overturn gerrymandered maps, right? So we have to go back in time, know our history, and know that history repeats itself unless we course correct. So in this moment, we have a legislature who are doing everything in their power in this moment to usurp their authority over the judiciary branch and holding something over their head. And in this moment, these have bill numbers, because what these bill numbers would turn into be, if they pass 2 consecutive sessions of both the state house and the state Senate, that they would then come to us as the voters to change our Pennsylvania Constitution with no recourse. And the Pennsylvania Constitution has only been around since the late 1960s, and it hasn't been changed that much until now. Until these last few years, have we seen tremendous changes made to our Pennsylvania Constitution and trying to be made to our Pennsylvania Constitution. So Nick, you asked, what's the top 1? What's the top 2? House Bill 38, judicial gerrymandering. They might call it redistricting or districting if they want to, but we're going to call it what it is. And it is judicial gerrymandering. It is taking the power away from voters, because in this very moment, depending on how long you've lived in the Commonwealth, you've been able to vote for every single one of the appellate court judges who sit on the Commonwealth Court, the Superior Court, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. You have the opportunity to vote for all 31 of those folks. But what House Bill 38 would do is it would change the way in which we are able to elect our appellate court judges, Pennsylvania being only one of a little more than a handful of states who vote for all of our judges. So you no longer as a voter be able to vote for 31 judges. You'd only be able to vote for 3. In districts that would be drawn by legislators. And we know what happens when we allow legislators to draw maps. So House Bill 38 is problematic. As a coalition, as a working group, as a fight back table, many organizations who are watching this today, on this panel today, join forces to fight back against House Bill 38 and the gerrymandering of our judiciary. Now, there's still work to do, because that fight is not over. We call that the zombie bill. That thing has been alive now for going on 3 years, and it has already passed 1 session of both the House and the Senate. If it passes the House and the Senate one more time, and they have until, I think it's now September, to put this on the November ballot, right? We would then have voters decide whether or not we want to vote for our appellate court judges in districts drawn by legislators, or all of them, how we have been doing that. Unfortunately, here in Pennsylvania, we have a deep history of voting yes on constitutional amendments. It's just human nature. It's common nature that you just don't want to say no to something you don't really know you're saying no to. And we also know sometimes the language around these questions can be a little confusing for folks who haven't been up on this topic and up on what's happening in Harrisburg. So House Bill 38 is one of those, and we need to continue to push back on that so that it does not appear on the ballot this coming November. We don't want that to happen. We don't want to have our votes suppressed or disenfranchise us. I want to vote for all 31 of those folks, not just the 3 that some legislator in Harrisburg tells me I'm allowed to. So House Bill 38 is one big one. The second one I'll throw out here is that a lot of these have to do around the judiciary and the election administration. And we know that in the year 2020, we had a very successful election. We know that folks of color came out in record numbers. The youth voters came out in record numbers and cast ballots against all odds and obstacles. We were in the midst of a global pandemic at that time, right? And so now what we have is we have a legislature, again, trying to legislate by amendment and not by the way in which decorum typically dictates how we legislate in Harrisburg, right? We have the legislative branch who are supposed to be legislating, right? Making laws. And so they're passing that over and trying to confuse voters by passing this to voters, particularly if they can do it in an off-year election or in a primary election when the bare minimum of folks come out and cast ballots, right? So the other ones that I want people to be aware of, in addition to House Bill 38, judicial gerrymandering, would be this new one coming up, House Bill 1910. This one would limit the Supreme Court's rulemaking authority in the same vein in which they limited Governor Wolf's authority to help us in the midst of a global pandemic. House Bill 1910 is in line with House Bill 1880, which limits the terms of sitting justices, or House Bill 2141, which would make retention voting not be a thing, that our judges would have to run for re-election over and over again. So as you can see, this is all coming out of folks who are upset at the judiciary branch for decisions that they've made to defend democracy and allow for voters to cast ballots in the midst of a global pandemic. And so that's just what's so important for folks to know in this moment, is that we have one branch of government trying to usurp its authority over another and payback for ensuring that the voters have a say in who it is we elect in office versus elected officials determining who their constituents will be.
Whole lot to unpack there, Kadita. A whole lot happening on that level with democracy defense. They're certainly coming after our institutions from a variety of angles, and we need to be prepared to defend it from all oncomers. Next, I'd like to come over. So you're seeing this a theme here. Okay, you're seeing how we need to support our healthcare workers. We need to support our education funding so that they can patronize our small businesses. So we need to support our small businesses, and we need to. And the way in which we can get some money to our small businesses is by getting through the logjam in Harrisburg and our legislators. We need to defend our right to vote and our democracy, so we can choose those legislators and our judges in the case of judicial gerrymandering and all of that, so that we can create a Pennsylvania that can work for everyone. So I'd like to come over to Jenna with Better for Pennsylvania to talk about support for working families. And my question for you, Jenna, is Governor Wolf's Brighter Pennsylvania program proposes an expansion of the PA Opportunity Program. And what that does is provides direct cash assistance to low-income families. Can you talk about why it's important to provide this type of relief? We're talking direct cash assistance and direct payments to low-income families, as opposed to some of the broader measures being proposed, like a gas tax holiday we're hearing about these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I've kind of been reading this question, and I'm overthinking it, I'm sure, but the answer just seems so obvious to me. And, maybe that's just because I, know what it's like to, live paycheck to paycheck. And I know how much of a difference that $100 can make. Whenever you have $0, $100 is the difference between, starving and being able to buy groceries for a week, right? Like just $100. I mean, if you walk up to any given person on the street and say, would you rather me give you $100 cash, or would you like to maybe wait for some gas tax holiday to trickle down to you after the corporation gets its tax cut? Obviously they're going to take the $100, right? When you're living in poverty, I think a lot of people don't really fully realize like how much of a difference just having a little bit of extra money can make. We live in this capitalist society where money is everything. You have to have money to do everything. You can't eat without money. You can't see a doctor without money. You literally can't do it. And so when you don't have it, it makes people desperate. And whenever people are desperate, that's when they start to do crazy things, having people living in survival mode. I mean, even a couple hundred extra dollars a month, it could be the difference between somebody living in survival mode and like having some breathing room to be able to know that they're going to have that little bit extra there to stretch in to the next month, right? Like, and I think that a lot of the people who are making these policies and coming up with all these great ideas about how they're going to help people in poverty have no idea what it's like to live in poverty. And a lot of times they don't know anybody who knows what it's like to live in poverty, and they don't bother to ask. There's a lot of savior complex that happens, and like, we're going to tell poor people what they need. I mean, I tell you what they need. They need money. Like, that's what they need. They need money. They don't need a gas tax holiday that may someday trickle down to them if the corporations that sell the gas decide they want to pass that tax cut along.
Thank you, Jenna. Sorry, someone's texting me for some reason right now. Thank you so much, Jenna, for that breakdown. You're absolutely right. We need to get money directly in the hands of folks that it would help the most. And we need to make sure that we are bypassing any sort of corporate welfare at this point, when people need money in their pockets. That's how we address some of the inequities in this system. Okay, so I did get a couple questions via private message. I'm going to ask for the entire panel. If you, whoever would like to answer, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand, and I'll call on you to unmute yourself. Here, and these are very general, so anyone here is able to answer. So for each of your issues, and actually, let me do this one by one. I'm going to go through one by one. For each of your issues, what is one thing people can do to make sure we are moving towards a better Pennsylvania for all of us? I'm going to start with Kadita this time, and then we'll go Stephon, Jackie, Jenna, Dwayne. Sound good? So I'll ask the question again. What is one thing people can do to ensure that we are moving towards a better PA for all of us? When we talk about democracy defense, how can people help, Kadita?
I'm coming from a voting rights organization, so I'm going to say vote. That is the one thing that we can do in this moment, while we still have the right to do it, is cast a ballot every year, twice a year here in Pennsylvania. So many Pennsylvanians feeling as though their needs are not being met. You know, as we travel the state and knock on doors and talk to people at tabling events, and et cetera. The common thread is people in rural, suburban, rural, urban, suburban, all the areas of Pennsylvania, all the regions of Pennsylvania feeling the same thing in this moment. Just not feeling as though their needs are being met. You know, I heard from Stephon earlier and talking about his need as a business owner not being met, right? And so we need to make sure that we're focusing on folks' needs being met, so that there is a reason for someone to come out and cast a ballot against all odds and obstacles that are currently being put before them. That's the big issue in this moment, that we have folks who won't turn out because they just don't see it changing their lives. And the realization here is that our vote is our voice, and we will not have elected officials who fear us and fear us voting them in, or fear them voting them out, if we do not consistently come out and cast our ballot and exercise our rights to vote in this moment. The other thing, and I'll just say this quickly, Nick, is that, in addition to that, is just education around voting itself. I can't tell you how many times I've approached people in the last 6-9 months who, didn't even know we had an election in 2021, thinking that the yard signs that they were seeing were from 2020, just leftover, still hanging out, right? No shade, no shame in this, because we need to do a much better job of educating the constituency out here about what is going on in this country, what is going on here in the Commonwealth, and how they can bring about the change they wish to see. We have some who don't understand what the power is of the governor, what the power is of the legislature, who to be mad at, right? Let's be mad at the right folks, so that when we're out here casting ballots, we can cast our ballots to bring about change for who needs to be changed. So that's my pitch here for voting, and to do that twice a year, every year here in the Commonwealth.
Heck yeah. And I'm gonna take this opportunity to also mention that I'm formerly incarcerated. I have a felony on my record. I can vote. I am allowed to vote. So if you're watching this, if you know someone who also has that kind of record, we are allowed to vote. And there's been a lot of misinformation going out throughout the years that we are not. We are allowed to vote. We're allowed to vote 2 times a year. We need to have our voices heard. Thank you, Kadita. Thank you so much. Stephon, are you still there? Did you have to step away to handle the biz?
I'm here.
Okay, no worries. So the question that I'm running through and asking other folks is, so, with your issue with providing support to small businesses, especially with Black-owned businesses and other minority businesses in the Commonwealth, how can the average person who's listening to this, what can they do? Can they help? How can they help to make sure that we're moving towards a brighter PA for everyone?
Through their support of businesses.
Yeah.
Basically, just go spend money with them. Just go spend money. Go frequent them. Tell your friends about them. It's the same way. Word of mouth is the best form of advertisement and marketing, as opposed to somebody paying millions of dollars for a Super Bowl commercial that lasts 30 seconds. Shop local as well, as Ms. Jenna says down here. Shop local, whether that's minority owned, women owned, Black owned, white owned. It don't matter. Keep it all within the local area. If there's a local coffee shop, local grocery store, local whatever, keep it there. Keep the dollar working for the community. Keep the dollar within the community. Don't give it to big corporations who take it over to California and then give it to some foreign Swiss bank account or whatever. You never see that dollar again. And, the main thing about it is also, believe in the product of that local shop. Don't always try to compare it to, your local Starbucks or anything. I'll be with y'all 1 second. Okay. Don't compare it to, your local Starbucks. Oh, this ain't like Starbucks. It's not like Starbucks. We're not Starbucks. Oh, my bread, this sandwich don't taste like Panera bread. It's not supposed to be like Panera bread. We're not Panera bread. The main thing is support local, but also give them a chance to earn your trust, earn your dollar, give them a second chance. If they messed up somehow, some way, in the slightest of ways, don't automatically write them off. How many times have we gone to McDonald's and the ice cream machine? Never worked, but we went back. For the last 20, 25 years, their ice cream machine has not worked in certain locations, but we always went back and we always asked for the ice cream, for a McFlurry, but we still gave them a chance. A small business may mess up and you will be like, oh, I never go there. Oh, that's why I don't shop local. Well, McDonald's ain't made their burger right way in the last 40 years, but you still go back. Starbucks coffee ain't been right since 1979 when they opened their door, but you still give them a chance. Give these businesses a chance and keep money within your community. And then when you go, visit, shop local as well. Even if you're leaving the state of Pennsylvania, you're in West Virginia, shop local as well. Try to keep that money within the community. Black businesses as well, we're affected the most. We get the last shake or draw of everything, whether it comes down from allocated money, grants, funds, with anything, bank loans. We're discriminated against by bank loans, and we could get into systematic oppression, systematic racism, and we could go on and on for hours about the education and the manipulations of the bank within the American system, and then also within the justice system, and now about them not passing fair laws that help benefit African Americans and women-owned businesses as well. And then we can even go into the LGBTQA+ community as well, how they're marginalized with the Black community when it comes to certain things. So it's all about support local, support it, and just giving them a fair shake. And don't always compare small businesses to conglomerates who have millions of dollars to get it right, get it correct, and not even really earn your money. You're just so a part of the norm of your everyday routine is going to these big conglomerate businesses that you don't even try to fight against the machine. You just go along with the process. Get out the matrix, people. You got to get out the matrix.
Thanks a lot, Stephon. If I can add into that, and also, support initiatives that support small businesses, and ensure that the people in power who are supporting initiatives that support small.
And also to go back to educating people on these initiatives. You know, same thing the lady before me said about, you know, educate people on voting. You got to educate people on there. And then also just, you know, get the information out there. That's the best way. Get the information out there, get the business's name out there, and word of mouth is the best advertisement.
That's right. Awesome. In fact, we may be in Harrisburg next week, so I'm hoping to get a chance to meet you. We can bring some staff members through. So, all right. Thank you, Stephon. Next, I'm going to kick it over to Jenna with Better for Pennsylvania. I think we're going to go. Then we will do Jackie. Then we will do Dwayne. And the question again, Jenna, is, let me see, go back up to find it. What is one thing people can do to make sure that we are moving forward towards a better Pennsylvania for all of us, specifically when talking about support for working class families? So this is a chance for you to talk a little more about how can individuals help us?
You know, I think I'm going to say, you know, everything Khadija said, and then take it a step further and say, you know, absolutely vote, run for office. If support other members of your community to run for office, because we need to, and the best thing that we can do for working families are put people in the position to make policy who actually know what it's like to be in a working family, to be, to live in poverty, I want to elect somebody who knows what it's like to have to choose between eating and paying their heat bill for the winter. I want somebody, we need people who understand our experiences and will listen to the experiences of people who have lived in poverty or who are still living in poverty without dismissing them as, oh, well, they don't know, or, well, studies say. I get that one a lot. I've had my own personal experience discredited by somebody saying, oh, well, studies say, actually. And that's just, I mean, that's just absurd to me. We need to listen to the people who are closest to the problem, because they are the ones who are closest to the solution.
You're right about that. That's one thing that we always say in this field, is that personal experience, it needs to be factored in when we talk about solutions. We need to make sure that we include the folks in the room and the voices in the room who have those personal experiences, so they can be involved in the crafting of said solutions. From Jenna to Jackie, from working families to education, how can the individual who's listening to this help us advocate for education funding? Jackie?
So Jenna stole my thunder. I was going to say run for something, because it's really important, to get, a lot of people are kind of involved in politics and know about what's going on at a federal level, or kind of know what's going on at a state level, but all of those things exist in a microcosm in your community. I promise, if you go look at it. If you ask a random person on the street in State College, they probably wouldn't think all the problems we're dealing with nationally are also showing their heads in our public school system right here in this district. And it's really about going after what you're interested in, because it's all related. It's all part of the same push, right? So if education is your jam, start going to school board meetings. Yeah, you'll be sitting through people, approving work orders to fix tractors, but you'll also be sitting through some amazing public comments that, you'll lose your mind. You'll love some of them, you'll hate some of them, you'll go through an entire gamut of emotions. And honestly, if we want to show up for our kids, you can show up for them by showing up for the board too, and supporting sensible actions at the school board meetings. And because I know Dwayne is coming up, I'm also just going to give a shout out to if healthcare is your thing, go support safe staffing, get out there and talk to them. There are so many things locally, people who deal with care. Okay. So nurses are in the business of caring. Teachers are in the business of caring. Social workers are in the business of care. These jobs are discredited and looked down upon. And any institution that's trying to promote these people and the work that they do need help. So there's so many different opportunities, and you don't have to do them all, right? It seems a little overwhelming, but if you just choose one, and you get like involved in that one locally, you'll soon find out that like you've met people from across the cross section of your community who care about slightly different things, but are working on the same page. So just plug in somewhere.
Especially, you know, in this, that, thank you so much, Jackie. That's excellent. And this is especially in the climate where our school board has become more politicized than in recent history or recent memory, and is becoming more and more politicized almost daily by people who don't seem to agree with the tenets of what we're talking about here today. Dwayne, last but not least, I know you've got a ton of ways for people to get involved.
Yeah, there really are. And, you know, Jackie, you said it, and Khadija to lift up, and Jenna, lift up what you both said too, all three of you. I mean, there's a common theme here, right? Like, for me, I think it really doesn't matter where you live or how much money you make or what you look like, you know, white, black, brown, none of that really matters. All of us want quality healthcare. We all want a good education for ourselves and our families. You know, we want our voices to be heard, you know, and there are those people out there who want exactly the opposite. They don't want you to vote, right? And they do this, you know, they try to divide us because they have their own agenda to stay in power, to get reelected, or to support the people who are funding their campaigns. You know, the corporations who really don't wake up every morning thinking about how they're going to educate their kid or take care of their grandmother in a nursing home or whatever that might be. They try to divide us, and they're pretty successful at it because many people will say things like, my vote doesn't count, or that all politicians are alike. Honestly, the only way you can ensure that your vote doesn't count is by not voting. I mean, and if you fall for that, you've fallen for it, you know, or the idea that that all politicians are like, all you have to do is like watch them for a little bit and see what they do. And you can tell there's a huge difference. All that tells me is that you're naive and that you are just falling for those false narratives. That's all that's saying. What I believe is when we come together, and a budget for our state is one of the ways that we come together, right? When we come together, we can have the good things, like we can have education. Why? Because there's all these other states that do it, that we can have healthcare for people, you know? And we look at every other country in the world that offers like healthcare for everyone. But the opposition is always telling us we can't have these good things because of them, because of the other people who don't look like us, who are lazy, or who are gaining the system and all those things, while they're taking the money and putting it in their own pockets. Wake up, folks. When we come together and when we vote, we win. We have the power to do the things that all of us are talking about today. And so that's the one thing. I think, Khadija, you kicked us off with voting. I'm going to end it there as well. Let's make sure that our voices are heard, and that's the sure way of doing it. So, and if you're registered, then talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, because we grew up, all of us, saying we should never talk about politics, right? Don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, don't talk about sex, don't talk about money. There's a whole list of things we shouldn't talk about. And then we wonder why we don't know anything about it. Why we don't know that there are 2 elections every year, right? A primary and a general, right? I was talking to someone at the bank here. I said, are you registered to vote? And he said, I'm not sure. How can you be not sure? I love that answer. I'm not sure. Well, we had a nice discussion and gave him some information, but we should, there are people who don't want us to talk about that. Right, I don't fall under that. So I think I'm just going to lift up what, you know, Jackie, Jenna, Kitty, everyone here has said, that go out, register the vote. We can have good things when we come together, and a budget is a way for us to do that. So plug in, it's all around you. If you think the problem is outside of yourself, that very thought is the problem.
Thanks, Dwayne. Yes, as Jackie said in the comments or in the chat as well, budget is a moral document. That is one way. You know, we all want nice things. We need the budget to pass that includes the money for those nice things, so that we can support businesses like Stephon's, so we can support education funding. We can give payments directly to workers and help support the healthcare industry. right, we're going to wrap it up here. I'm going to go through each one of you and give you an opportunity to give us a closing statement, maybe highlighting a part of your issue that you're focused on today that you really want people to walk, or a point that you really want people to walk away from here with. Voting could have been a really good one. I will note that we are going to continue to explore topics for the We the People Pennsylvania campaign to address moving forward. We're going to drop a call to action. If you want to help us support the Brighter Pennsylvania plan, we will drop the call to action in the chat during these closing. And then we're also doing a series of community conversations. If there's something that you didn't hear about here, but you think the We the People Pennsylvania campaign should be paying attention to, please fill out that community conversation form. We are doing a listening tour across the Commonwealth, both virtually and in person, in order to make sure that we're hearing from everyone about the issues that matter to them the most. I am going to start, I would like to start with Stephon. Are you there? I would either start or end with him.
Yes.
With it. Okay, great. No, okay, cool, awesome. So we're gonna close this out, and like if you could just give us, a 1 minute final statement, essentially talking about, what is one detail or key point about your issue, something maybe not often addressed that you want to make sure that whoever's listening here takes away from this conversation today.
That women-owned and minority-owned businesses aren't getting their fair share of the pie in the state of Pennsylvania, that we are again marginalized and discriminated against at a numerous rate. Whether we're doing good or we're doing bad, the money is still supposed to be allocated to us and to help boost us back up to address the effects of the pandemic and the harshness that it's had on the economic stability within our communities. Also, until the money is passed down to these women and minority-owned business, support them. Go give them a chance. Give them a chance to win you over. Give them the chance to show you that their product, that their services are on big corporation levels, but that the money is actually being used to go back within the community that you serve, that you are from. So that's my biggest takeaway. Until we are able to, get this money down from the legislative body, please go out there and support small businesses as much as you can. Tell your friend about them, tell your family about them, and that's pretty much all I can say.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today, Stephon. Once again, Stephon Hawkins, owner proprietor of Good Brothers Cafe in Harrisburg. I can't wait to check it out next week. Dwayne.
Yes. So I think we all know how important staffing is in our healthcare facilities. And, this budget, this Brighter PA budget actually does address that. And so I would like to say that my one ask would be to call your state legislator, your member of the House, your member of the Senate, give them a call and just tell them that you support Governor Bush's Brighter PA budget because it includes safe staffing or because it includes the education funding that we need. That very simple thing is so important because the number one thing that motivates legislators is getting reelected. And so if you're their constituent, if you can vote for them, by the way, remember there's 2 elections every year and your state legislator is going to be one of them this year. You can actually call them and say, hey, I'm trying to decide who I'm going to vote for. And something that's really important to me is this Brighter PA budget. Can I get your support for this? Yes or no? Ask them and then tell them you're going to follow up on it and see how they vote. That's what I would do. Yeah. And have some accountability. So that's my ask. Call your legislator.
I love accountability. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dwayne. Once again, everyone, that was Dwayne Heisler, campaign coordinator at Seiu Healthcare, Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us today. What did I put in the order? Next, Jackie.
All right. So thanks so much for listening today. Like, if you care about education funding, there's 2 things, maybe just one now. There's something you can do. Fight back against the narrative when Republican legislators say we don't have the money to do this, because it's just false. We have the money to do this. And while they just want to sit on it, we could spend it and make generational impacts. So anytime you hear people talking about how like, oh, well, I hear we don't have the money in the budget, like flip the table if you're feeling feisty, right? We have the money. We can do this now, right? The other thing I'm just going to ask you to do is to understand that we've been going through a cycle where legislators have been setting up public education to fail for a long time, and they've been squeezing the life out of it. And so now they want to point at it and say, see, it doesn't work. So fight that narrative too. It can work, and we can make it work, and we can make a much brighter future for our kids. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, and thanks for coming and joining us, everyone. That was Jackie Huff, State College Area School Board member in Pennsylvania, and representing Pennsylvanians for fair funding. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jackie. Jenna, want to close this out, or want to give a closing statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's one thing to do right now, it's, we have an $11 billion surplus in our money right now. And I think the Republican Party is kind of taking advantage of the fact that our brains can't really process how big that number actually is, right? I mean, you say a million, a billion, it's not much of a difference other than one letter to most people, and they don't actually realize how much different it is. If I save $100,000 for 10 years, I'll be a millionaire in a decade. I mean, it would take me 10,000 years to become a billionaire saving the same amount, right? Like it is an absolutely astronomical amount of money. It is enough money to lift every single person in this state out of poverty if they would only spend it in the right way. And so urge your legislators to spend this money on Pennsylvania's working people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jenna. That's actually, and that was Jenna Henry, Deputy Director for Better Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining us today, Jenna. Yeah, that's why I say billions with a B, Bezos billions of dollars is how much money they've got. Kadita, last but certainly not least, I love letting you bring us home. What is one point or something you'd like to highlight? How would you close? I know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
I hope you know what I want to say, because I'm about to talk to about somebody whose name is kind of similar to mine, and that would be Ketanji. So Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, we've all been maybe watching this hearing happen the last few days here. Let's reach out to our senators, our U.S. senators, and let them know the groundswell of public opinion that we are in favor of having a more representative democracy. And that means that we need to have a Black woman sit on the United States Supreme Court who is eminently qualified to do the job. And if you've been watching that hearing, you understand how qualified she is to do that job and how much she deserves to be on that bench for the United States Supreme Court. So that's how I'm going to close it out today. It's time for Judge Ketanji to sit on the United States Supreme Court, and I can't wait.
Fantastic. Well, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to all of our guests. Thank you to everyone who joined us. We dropped a couple calls to action in the chat. Please take a moment and click on those. Thank you for everything everything that each of you are working on here in the Commonwealth. It's very and vitally important to the direction of the Commonwealth. Thank you for all the hard work. We've got a lot ahead of us, and I will see you in the trenches throughout the course of the next year. Take care, everyone.